Hey, this is Mr. Dan from Touch Technologies, and today we're going to take a look at some more information about routines, in particular parameter passing, and we're going to talk about private routines, and we're going to be talking about scoped routines. In a previous tutorial, we talked about global routines. The global routine in Sheerpower is used from only one place in your code. Its job is to declutter your code. Okay? It's not a generalized routine to be called from all over your code. A global routine is designed to declutter code. But now we're going to talk about some other kinds of routines. Again, the private routines and the scoped routines. But first, we're going to talk about passing parameters to routines. And this is done by naming each parameter. I know a lot of programming languages, you choose the parameter by its location in the call stream. So if you, for instance, have a function that has 3 parameters, parameter 1 means something, parameter 2 means something, parameter 3, you have to remember the order of the parameters. In Sheerpower, you don't do that. You basically give the parameter a name. So here's our routine we're creating with, and then an input parameter, returning an output parameter. By the way, you can have up to 16 inputs and you can have up to 16 outputs. So your routines can really do a lot. Of course, 16 is kind of ridiculous. You don't want to be doing that very often. No one will be able to maintain your code. And as a reminder, code maintenance is everything. That's what you're trying to help, is to reduce code maintenance. So here's, for example, we have a little question here. How old are you? Little Q dollar. And we're going to call a routine called getAnswer. Here's the routine down here, getAnswer. So you getAnswer with question, and then our variable that has the question. How old are you? Returning an answer, which will be their answer, $1. And then our code is going to say print, you are $1, which is the answer, years old. And here's the routine and how it works. Routine, getAnswer. Okay, name of the routine, pretty simple. See, it matches here. With question, right, which is here. Returning answer, which is here. The way this routine works is that it gets a line of input asking for an answer. If the answer is nothing, then it says, print, please enter an answer, and it repeats the routine, which means it just goes to the top of the routine and to come back down again. If they did give an answer, then the routine ends, and the variable called $1 receives the answer. And now back up here again, print you are 10 years old, and that stops. And again, Sheerpower supports up to 16 inputs, not recommended, and 16 outputs for parameters for each routine. So that gives you plenty of options for inputs and outputs. Really anything more than about 3 or 4 is probably adequate for most programming requirements. So that is parameter passing. Let's move on to private routines. Unlike public routines, whose primary purpose is to break down program code into smaller, manageable segments, as we talked about before, a private routine is very different. The purpose of a private routine is to be called from potentially multiple places in the code. And here's an example of a private routine that writes messages to a message file. So we put the word private on the front, routine, name of the routine, write message, with, this means we have a input parameter coming in, with MSG. And right here I have a reference to a variable. Now you'll notice this variable name doesn't exist anywhere outside of here. That means that this variable MSG_CH is a private variable. And it starts out initialized at 0. All variables in a private routine are initialized when you first start with them. Okay, so let's take a look at it. It says if MSG_CH is equal to 0, which it will be, first time we call this routine, it's going to open up a file. It's going to pass the file channel, is what it's called, to the message channel thing here. And then here's the name of the file, message.log, and we're going to access it by outputting to it. Okay. And that's the end of that code. And then the next line, which is not part of the if, will say print to the message channel the current time, a space, and then the message, and then the routine ends. Okay, so the write message private routine has a single parameter called MSG and a private variable called MSGCH. This variable shows up because we referenced it. Okay, the fact that we mentioned it and as a private routine creates that variable. It actually creates that when the program first starts, even before this routine is accessed. The first time the write message is called, again, this private variable called MSGCH will be a 0 because it got initialized that way. And the second and subsequent times that it's called, it'll have whatever the channel number is that comes from the channel number that comes from the open file here. Okay, and this is how it works. In order for Sheerpower to keep MSGCH private, it has a secret name when compiled, which is the name of the routine, write_message, and then a $sign MSGCH. And this makes MSGCH unique within your program. We'll be talking here shortly about how we handle the scoping of these things and that kind of stuff. So, very similar. This will be quick. Scoped routines. Scoped routines are almost identical to the private routines, but there are two major differences. In private routines, all the private variables are automatically reset when the routine is first called, meaning that they're set to values of zeros and nulls. In scoped routines, all private variables are reset each time entering and exiting the routine. Remember, in a private routine, we do it just once, which means that the values of the private variables are persistent, or what's also called static. In scoped routines, these variables are reset every time you enter and exit a routine. This is typically how routines work in other programming languages, that when you come into the routine, the variables are initialized. Okay, scoped routines can contain a static statement in case you do want a variable to persist between calls. Any private variables that are marked as static are not reset upon entering or exiting the scoped routine. And this can be used, well, here you can see here, scoped routine, write message with message. We say static MSGCH. This means we want this variable, this private variable, to retain its value between calls. And then we do the same thing here. We reference a variable here called counter, right here, counter. And counter will be reset to 0 each time through because this is a scoped routine. Upon entry, whatever counter is going to be reset to 0, and upon exit, it will also be reset to 0. Very, very similar to functions you're probably used to in other programming languages. The private variable MSG, again, retains its value each time because it's marked static. The private variable counter will be reset each time upon entry or exit because it's not marked as static. And that's a summary of our routines. Thank you very much, and remember to subscribe, etc., etc.